Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Safe House, brought to you by the Safe House Initiative. I'm Jeff Edwards, co-chair of the Safe House Initiative and your host for today's podcast. Welcome back to the conversation of cyber insurance. Tawana is leading us through a series of great conversations with experts within the cyber insurance industry, but also in the whole ecosystem to get a really more of a holistic view of what cyber insurance is and what it isn't and what it can do for you to help offset your risk. Tawana, last week we had Ryan Mercer talk about the application process and the role that the broker plays. And one of the things he said is make sure you pay attention to the details and prep for a claim that might happen in the future. Is that about right where we are in terms of our conversation?
Yeah, I think that's a good high-level summary.
And then one thing he led us up to is like, okay, now the broker interfaces with the insured or the one that's going to get the insurance policy and the insurance company. And so today it goes into the insurance company through the underwriting department. Did I get that correct?
I believe you did, yes.
And so what do you have in store for us this day?
Today, we have Heather Mongeau, the Vice President and Director of Cyber Product Solutions with Allied World Insurance Company. Hi, Heather. Thanks for joining
Hi.
us.
Thank you, Tawana. I'm happy to be here.
Let's get started by introducing yourself to our audience. Tell us what you do and how you got into your career in underwriting cyber insurance.
Certainly, I'm happy to do so. Um, I'm Heather Mongeau, and as you said, my title is Vice President, Director of Cyber Product Solutions. So, what I do is I work closely with Allied World's global cyber product lead. I strategically review our portfolio, continually refining and defining the roadmap. I work and collaborate with stakeholders and cross-functional teams, striving for operational excellence. I also do a lot of metrics and reporting. It is underwriting, so I'm always doing the reporting. I'm the cyber liaison for brokers in our professional lines partnership program. And I also am one of the designers for our first year underwriters in an underwriter training program. Next week, I'll be back in New York as it's in its third year. So I'm excited about that. And I also still underwrite. Allied World recently launched our cyber product in Canada. So I work on Canadian business and trying to build out the portfolio in Canada. And how I got into underwriting, let's go back to 2008. That was a really tough year. I had decided that my children were old enough to legally and to stay by themselves, and they were mature enough to stay by themselves. So I decided to go back from managing a bar and teaching high school English part-time to working in corporate America. And I got my job at Allied World in 2009. And I started at the bottom. I started as a submission administrator because I'd been out of the corporate America for 12 years. And so when I got to Allied World, I had three goals for myself. I wanted to become an underwriter. I wanted to get promoted to assistant vice president. And my stretch goal was I wanted to participate in the HIPO program. Now, HIPO is it's for Allied World. It's an internal MBA style program. It's short for high potential. You need to be nominated and then by senior management and then voted in. So you can't just sign up for learning and development. In 2012, I was promoted to underwriter. So goal number one was met. And then I moved into cyber underwriting in 2015. So I started underwriting in 2012 for the lawyer's professional liability department. And then in 2015, I moved over into cyber underwriting. And shortly thereafter in 2020, I became an AVP and got into the hypo program. So I was very excited. So that's how I got into cyber. When I first got in 2015, it was really difficult because I didn't understand all of the coverages. I moved from lawyers' professional liability, which was very understandable because we all know what law firms do in a way, right? Now I'm moving over to cyber, and I really could not tell the difference between what's a record and what's like an individual. Aren't they the same thing? So I understand when small business owners look at a cyber policy and they're confused, and so I hope today that I can kind of unravel part of that mystery of what cyber is and help small business owners.
Well, Heather, I think that's exactly what we're hoping to achieve today as well. And I want to back up just a second. When you talk about, you're in charge of reporting for underwriting, what exactly are you reporting on?
Okay, so everything, it's so funny being, coming from an English major background, everything in underwriting is about production, right? So we want to quote the business, quote um, the insureds that come to us, quote that business and bind that business. So I'm constantly looking at premium, the aggregate limits. Who are we binding with? Um, I'm looking at claims, right? How many claims do we have? What types of claims are coming in? Are these claims particular to a certain class of business, right? So I'm always kind of diving into the portfolio to have a understanding of what we're doing. Whereas, when I was just getting started as an underwriter, I would look specifically at that one account, right?
Mhm.
And try to figure out if that was an account that I wanted to extend coverage for or not. So now in my role, I'm looking at the entire portfolio. I'm looking at thousands of accounts and trying to see trends as to help, further, like I said, define what we need to be doing down the road. Because we're, Allied World, we're in it. We've been in cyber since 2007, long before I got to the company, and we are in it for as long as we can be, right? We are in it for the long haul. So we need to have an understanding of what we're underwriting, what we're putting on the books, and how it shapes that portfolio.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It, Heather, I know a lot of times we kind of throw around the word underwriting, and I'm not sure people really understand what that means. We kind of have a high level understanding that it's
Hmm.
something involving insurance, but can you kind of give us a little more in depth explanation of what underwriting means?
Sure. So I'll start off, but like the really short answer of what underwriting is I evaluate a risk and decide whether we're going to extend coverage or not. So it's basically evaluating and approving or rejecting a risk. Now, what does that really mean? Risk is, for me, a risk is an unforeseen circumstance that could happen. And if it does happen to a prospective insured, it's going to change their objectives. It may stop their objective, right? So underwriting is bridging that gap, right? If something happens, something unforeseen happens, and you can't continue what you're doing, are you going to throw in the towel? No, that's where insurance comes in because it bridges that gap. It takes, what would have been or could be a catastrophic loss and put a company out of business and provides them the finances to get through it and make them whole so they can continue operating like they were before that incident happened. Does that make sense? Does
Makes
that?
complete sense. I
Okay.
can't tell you how many times I get on an initial phone call with a client who is just devastated because they are undergoing some type of attack or have had an incident and they're just terrified that, it's the end of their business. So I think that makes perfect sense that, this is something that's going to help keep the business afloat in the event of like you said, a catastrophic type of incident.
Yeah. And one thing that I learned very early on in underwriting, especially cyber, it's not if, it's when. And that's kind of a scary thing that it can happen to anybody. I was at a wedding a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking to someone that I had just met on the groom side, and he asked what I did for a living, and I told him I'm a cyber underwriter. And later on, when it was just the two of us, he came over and he said, "It's interesting that you said that you're a cyber underwriter." He's like, "I own a small business in Connecticut and we are going through a cyber breach right now." And I said, "Oh my God." I said, "First of all, who's your carrier? Do you have insurance?" And he said he did. And he was working with someone that I actually know. So that was good. And then I asked, "How did it happen?" And he said that, he had a company of like 30 people. And one of his longtime loyal employees got an email
Mm.
and gave out credentials. And so that was the catalyst. And so, I think sometimes, longtime employees, loyal employees, they can be your strongest asset and sometimes the weakest link. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And, you're not the first guest that we've had that has said, it's not a matter of if, but when. And I say it all the time as well. It's truly everybody is at risk for sure.
yes.
So, Heather, can you just kind of talk a little bit about what small and mid-sized business owners should know about the cyber insurance application and potential pitfalls and how that application can impact underwriting?
Sure. At Allied World, first of all, let me back up because I think there are definitely different carriers out there providing cyber insurance. And so you have insurance companies and they have different appetites as far as, small business, middle, medium size, and large size business. So, and there's different applications, right? And different ways of sending in that application. So I can tell you from my perspective is that we have an actual underwriter underwriting each and every account. So you're going to get some other carriers or MGUs or insurtechs, they might use a portal where the application is sent in and AI kind of proofs or goes through it and and determines like if it fits in the box or not, and then it might get sent out to an underwriter. But when it gets sent into Allied World, you're going to get an underwriter looking at that account. So the first part of that the prospective insured needs to do is complete an application. And pretty much, I've looked at thousands of accounts over the years, and most applications ask very similar questions. They're worded differently, but they're asking similar questions. And I think that one of the pitfalls that I have seen time and time again is that insureds are trying to answer every single question as accurately and as thoroughly as possible. And, oftentimes it's a checkbox. It's either yes, no, or not applicable. Well, cyber is not black and white, and there are different controls that an insured might have. And so I think that one of the pitfalls is misunderstandings of questions and miscommunication and trying to, like, if the answer is not a 100% yes, then they might put no. And that's not an accurate answer because it might be something in the middle. It might be something else. So I think that when a prospective insured is filling out an application, it's really good for them to be working with a knowledgeable broker, their liaison to the insurance carrier, someone to help guide them through that process. Because the underwriter, when they get the application, I'm looking at it and I'm trying to determine if they have acceptable controls in place for me to extend coverage or not.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense, and that's I think something that we talked about with Ryan as well, and that I've heard as an issue from other carriers. Years ago, back in the early days when I first started doing cyber, I know the application was for some carriers was one page front and back,
Right.
it's definitely a very different type of application now for sure.
I know when I first started, I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast that when I first started out, like the difference between a record and an individual was confusing, not only to me, but also potential insureds. And so I didn't know that, you know, an individual is one person, but a record, an individual could have like 20 records, right? Their name, their first name, their last name, their social security number, their address, they're all different records. So sometimes we would get insureds sending in that they had, you know, more records than the population of the world. And so you're like, I'm not sure if you have that many records,
Let's talk
that
about
many
that.
individuals, right? So
Yeah.
there's an education process that, we're still going through, right? Because I think cyber is the one product that continually changes, right?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. It's definitely an evolving um, ecosphere, shall we say. And kind of along those same lines, Heather, I know that I've talked to some insurance carriers that conduct their own sort of penetration testing. When they receive an application, why might a small mid-sized business consider conducting their own penetration testing as part of the insurance application?
Um, that's a good question because, well, first of all, what are all of these tests, right? What is a vulnerability assessment and a penetration test? Um, Vulnerability assessments are, you know, that's it could be a continual scan, it could be a periodic scan of their network or their apps or their environment to see if there's a known vulnerability. A pen test, penetration test, we call it pen testing, like you said, that takes it a step further, right? That's a simulated cyber attack in which the IT team can then test to see where there could be holes in their security posture and to see what does a cyber attack look like if it were actually happening. And so it's a really good tool for insureds to use so that they can also have a proactive not response, but a proactive take on their own security posture, right? Because, you know, this is like the old insurance thing. If your house is on fire, that's not the time to look to look for property insurance, right? So, as an underwriter, pretty much all applications will ask for when was the last time you did a pen test? How often do you perform vulnerability assessments? How often do you test your business continuity plan? And I know that these maybe our listeners may not know them all, but if the answer is never, then I'm gonna sit back in my chair and take a pause on that because that's telling me that the insured is not doing their due diligence in knowing where their own holes could be in their security posture. So I think underwriters like to see that the insured is doing as much as they can, and then the insurance comes on top, right? You
Mhm.
know, to again bridge that gap or uh, make sure that if that catastrophic event happens, that it doesn't, obliterate that insured. It doesn't make them go out of business or anything like that.
I think that's great advice for sure. Uh, Jeff, did you have any questions for Heather
I always have questions, Tawana.
today?
You know that. Hey,
I do.
Heather, that makes a lot more sense in terms of. I love the way you explained the penetration testing, things of that nature, and the business continuity plan. If you have it, if you don't, if you tested it, if you haven't, all makes a big impact, right?
Definitely. Yes.
So what I always ask, and this is how I earn my keep because Tawana pretty much could run the show without me easily, as I ask our guests if there's one thing that our audience could do today that they could actually accomplish, what would that one thing be today to help improve their risk?
Help improve their risk. That's tough to do one thing, right? because it's cyber security is very interconnected. I can tell you that there are some things that if they don't do it, then it's going to be tough to get an insurance company to extend coverage, right? So
Mhm.
if they do not have multi-factor authentication to access their either remotely or within the building or their backups. If they don't have two-factor or multi-factor authentication, then a lot of carriers will probably pass on that prospective insured.
Okay.
I think also that, I guess my advice would be don't go it alone. You don't have to.
Yeah.
Cyber's been around for several decades, and carriers, we, you know, we partner with vendors for pre-breach risk management. So I know with small business, perhaps they don't have the resources to figure out all of these things, vulnerability assessments, pen testing, MFA, business continuity plans. But that's okay if they can partner with a carrier. The carrier, most carriers have pre-breach risk management services
Mm, mm.
that they can access. So and carriers do it differently. Some carriers it's voluntary, it's confidential, it comes at no additional cost, right?
Mm,
Some
mhm.
carriers, you get the policy itself, the premium is a little cheaper, but you pay sort of like a la carte. You pay for certain services at perhaps some discounted pricing. But my my advice is don't go it alone.
Yeah.
Find a broker that that as a prospective insured that you're comfortable working with, that they're knowledgeable in cyber, that they have access to several different markets, that they understand what your needs and goals are, and then they can go out and find a carrier that can fill those needs and provide because it's not with cyber, it's not just buying the policy
Right.
for the post breach, right? The claims handling. That's still important, but that's not at all. There's a lot of pre-breach risk management services that can help small business owners bolster their security posture and to ensure that they're not the low-hanging fruit, right? You put up that fence out in front of your house, you lock your windows, you lock your doors, you hope that the threat actor
Mhm,
drives by and goes to
mhm.
somebody else who's easier pickings.
And I think that, and listening to you and our previous guests, Stephen and Ryan, there was a lot that cyber policies do offer that you don't think about in terms of helping you prevent. And at worst case, it sounds like that pre policy assessment that's free in pretty much every case, right? Would be a nice checklist to say, hey, if I just did these things, I would be in better shape even without a cyber policy. But a cyber policy really brings a lot of value beyond just the risk offset, the financial aspects. It helps me operationally in nature.
That's exactly right. There's
Mm,
more most, like I said, most carriers offer a pre-breach risk management
yeah.
services. And again, it runs the gamut from voluntary and no additional cost to costing like sort of a la carte or maybe for the whole program. Again, those are things that the prospective insured would discuss with their broker to see what suits them. What are their goals, needs, and what's the best policy for them to
Yeah.
handle that pre-breach to make sure that in the event that they do have a cyber attack or, some type of system disruption, that their policy is going to come in and, mitigate or,
Hmm.
possibly it's not going to be as bad
Yeah.
as if they were just doing it by themselves, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I have another I have another story of I used to run very early in the morning. It was the middle of winter and it was like 5:30 in the morning. It was dark and we're at the park and I was waiting for my friends and one of my friends gets there and he's on the phone at 5:30 in the morning. And he gets out of the car and he's like, "Heather, we're having a cyber attack right now. And I'm like, oh my God,
Oh, no.
who's your cyber carrier? He's like, we don't have one. I was like, that's tough,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh, boy. Yeah.
So you don't want to be in that situation. Most cyber policies will have an incident evaluation hotline right on that declaration page, and
Yeah.
there and insureds can. First of all, I would suggest print out your policy, because if your systems get locked up, you're not going to have access to your electronic policies. So print it out, print out your call sheet, have that incident evaluation hotline, at your fingertips, and call it, because what the worst can happen is that, the breach coach says, "Oh, no, that's not a cyber attack, right? Oh,
Yeah.
okay."
Yeah.
That's the worst, right? The
Yeah.
best is you're having a cyber attack, and now you have attorney-client privilege immediately,
Yeah.
and the breach coach is already quarterbacking the response.
Yeah, in our first conversation that we started this series with, it was understanding the series itself, but what Tawana as a breach coach, what she does, and the quarterback function that they serve, I think is an unbelievable benefit to have as part of an insurance your policy.
Exactly. You wanna get the experts in and get them in early. The breach coach, the forensics experts, and carriers partner with the breach coaches and forensic experts, right? So
Yeah,
that
yeah,
and along with the insured is one of the partners, right? So
yep,
I think that's very important, especially, you know, risks that are smaller, and, maybe they don't have a whole department devoted to IT security.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
And
yep,
so I think that it's important to get these experts in early and start that process of getting the insured back up and running as quickly as
yeah,
possible. You don't want to be one of the insureds that's down for 3 weeks. What is your business going to look like if you can't work, can't function, can't get your products out, can't get your services done? If it takes three weeks or more to get back up and running.
yeah. Yeah, so like you said, don't go it alone and go with the experts. And so
Exactly.
great advice. And Heather, I tell you, underwriting, I think is there's a lot more understanding. You help break it down to where it's like, oh, it makes sense to me, and I'm sure it's going to help a lot of folks better understand the process of underwriting. And I want to thank you on behalf of Tawana, myself, and the rest of the Safe House Initiative. It's going to be extremely helpful to a lot of folks around the world. And thank you for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's been a lovely morning.
That's great. Hey, Tawana,
Yes.
do you want to tell us who's next week and what we can expect?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay.
next week we have Brandy Vargas. She is the senior manager for cyber solutions and e-risk with Crum and Forster, and she's going to be talking with us about. She has an interesting role. It's kind of an intermediary between the insurance carrier and the insured from beginning to end. And she's going to be talking to us about some of her roles and responsibilities and technical communications in the
Hmm.
event of an incident.
Is that because it's cyber is kind of a unique animal in terms of how complex technically it is?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not like, you had a car accident or,
Mhm.
you need a roof repair on your house. It's definitely a very different animal. And there are a lot of moving parts to it for sure.
Well, unless a computer lands on your house or you hit a computer in the street, then maybe there'd be more technical aspects to it. But, I think that's a bit of an obscure, maybe a corner case that you won't run into very often.
I think you're stretching it a little bit there, Jeff.
Ah, well, that's where I live. That's where I live, Tawana. You know that. All right. Well, until next week, have a wonderful week.
Thanks, Jeff. That's
Our podcast for today. I'm Jeff Edwards for the Safe House Initiative. Thanks for joining us. And remember, be safe, be resilient, and be kind to each other. For more information about the Safe House Initiative, please use your mobile device to scan the QR code on the screen or send us an email at info@safehouseinitiative.org or visit us on our website, safehouseinitiative.org. We look forward to hearing from you.